In the most luxurious mansion in Bel Air in Los Angeles, there was a secret no one could explain. 2 babies cried non-stop every night, and 12 nannies had already fled in terror. But everything changed when a humble woman walked through that gate. What she discovered inside that house could change the millionaire's life forever. Edward Lancaster, and yours too.
In the noble region of Bel Air, in Los Angeles, there stood a mansion that looked like it came straight out of a postcard. Imported crystal chandeliers, impeccably manicured gardens, and luxury cars parked at the entrance. From the outside, the image was one of prosperity, absolute success, and a flawless life. But behind the high walls lurked a disturbing sound that never ceased. Every night, the house was filled with a shrill, incessant, almost supernatural crying. It was the 8-month-old twins, Liam and Matthew, children of the millionaire businessman Edward Lancaster. Babies who should have brought joy, but only brought despair and sleepless nights. Their crying was so intense that it seemed to echo through the halls like screams of pain. Edward, a widower since the birth of the boys, had tried everything to silence that torment. He hired renowned nurses, experienced nannies, even specialists in difficult newborns. But nothing worked, and one by one, they all left, unable to bear the situation. There were already 12 layoffs in just 8 months, a record of failure that tarnished his reputation. Employment agencies in Los Angeles, they already refused to meet his requests. They said that working in that mansion was risking one's sanity. Some employees even whispered that the babies were cursed from birth. And the millionaire found himself increasingly isolated, trapped by the incessant crying of his own children. Every morning, when silence should have reigned, the twins' crying intensified. The sound passed through walls, climbed stairs, and filled every corner of the luxurious mansion. The neighbors, accustomed to the family's refinement, Lancaster, were already whispering dark stories. They said that the house, despite its wealth, carried the sadness of an unresolved grief. Edward, exhausted, spent his nights walking the halls like a living ghost. Red eyes, confused mind, heart hardened by pain and anger. He no longer saw his children as blessings, but reminders of the irreparable loss of Anna Claire.
It was a sultry afternoon in Los Angeles when the 12th nanny decided to leave. Susan, a 40-year-old woman, hurried out with her hands shaking. Edward Lancaster followed her furiously, his deep voice echoing through the halls of the mansion. "I pay you $5,000 a month, and you can't shut up 2 babies," he yelled. The tone was one of contempt, of someone who believed that money could buy any solution. Susan, before walking through the door, stopped just to look at him one last time. Her eyes were filled with pity, but also with courage, held back by exhaustion. "They don't need money, Mr. Lancaster. They need affection." The sentence sounded like a slap in the face to the millionaire, who was left without an immediate response. Susan then added in a voice choked with resignation and helplessness, "And you never gave that." The silence that followed was heavier than the crying coming from upstairs. Edward clenched his fists, embarrassed by the simple woman's audacity. But instead of admitting the truth hidden in her words, he reacted with fury. "Get out of here! Don't ever come to my house again!" And the door slammed shut, sealing yet another failure in the widower's life. At that moment, Edward felt the weight of humiliation, but not just from the employee. What hurt was the feeling that the whole world was secretly judging him. The neighbors whispered, the agencies refused, and even the housekeeper, Mrs. Collins, avoided his eyes. The millionaire, who dominated million-dollar businesses in Los Angeles, was incapable of controlling his own home. Liam and Matthew, they cried even louder, as if mocking their impotence. He climbed a few steps up the stairs, but stopped, unable to cross the hall. The children's room had become forbidden territory, a living reminder of the tragedy. And Edward, even though he was a father, didn't have the courage to walk through that door. In the room, the echo of Susan's sentence continued to torment him like a sentence. They don't need money, they need affection. Edward hated to admit it, but he had never held the boys in his arms. He always justified his absence by saying that he worked 16 hours a day. But deep down, the truth was different. The babies reminded him of his dad, Anna Claire. Every cry was a stab. Every look from his children was a mirror of his guilt. And so, he preferred to hide in the office, drowning in contracts and figures. It was easier to deal with millions of dollars than with two innocent children. That night, the mansion felt even more suffocating than usual. The twins cried incessantly, and Edward paced the room with heavy steps. The bottle of whiskey on the table betrayed his failed attempts to numb the pain. Outside, the moon illuminated Los Angeles, indifferent to the drama of that family. Inside, Edward felt like a defeated man in his own fortress. And when the housekeeper appeared to announce that there was someone at the gate asking for a job, he didn't know it yet, but his life was about to turn upside down. Because whoever arrived that night wasn't just a maid, she was salvation.
The mansion's doorbell rang at the height of the despair of that endless night. Mrs. Collins, the long-time housekeeper, appeared hesitantly before Edward. "There's a girl at the gate, asking for a job, sir." He exploded. "Job? What I need is someone to shut these boys up. She said she'll accept any job, even cleaning floors, but she understands children." Edward raised his eyebrows in disbelief at the boldness of that proposal. "Collins, are you crazy? I've already rejected qualified nannies. Am I going to hire a housekeeper?" But deep down, I knew I had no other options. And that's how Mary Dawson entered the Lancaster house for the first time. Coming from a simple neighborhood of East Los Angeles, wore a modest blouse and weather-worn pants, her hair tied in a makeshift bun, the firm gaze of someone who already knew pain. He was not intimidated by the crystal chandeliers or the imported rugs. What caught his attention was the sound of babies crying upstairs. Mary introduced herself in a calm voice. "Good evening, Mr. Lancaster. I'm Mary." He replied coldly, "I don't need a cleaning lady. I need a miracle." And she replied, "Sometimes the miracle is just really listening." The businessman looked at her ironically, laughing bitterly at her conviction. Listen, 12 professionals tried and got nowhere. Mary took a deep breath, not lowering her eyes at his arrogance. 12 professionals looked at babies as a problem, not as people. Edward clenched his jaw, feeling challenged for the first time in months. "And what do you understand about this if you don't have a degree?" "I understand because I raised a brother alone since he was 2 months old." That unexpected answer made the millionaire silent for a few seconds. The twins' cries echoed louder, as if they were calling Mary by name. She looked up toward the stairs and asked, "Can I go up?" He hesitated, torn between pride and the despair that consumed him. "Go up? You have no proven experience. You'll just waste my time." "It doesn't hurt to try, sir. What's happening to them is not normal." Her tone was not of petition, but of someone who was certain of what she was saying. Collins, nearby, reinforced, "Let this girl see, Mr. Lancaster. We have nothing to lose." and at the housekeeper's entreaty, he gave in with a reluctant nod. Mary began to climb slowly, her steps light on the carpet of the silent stairs. Each step seemed to bring her closer not only to the babies, but also to the truth. The hallway smelled abandoned, with closed doors and pictures removed from the walls. The house that should have been home was just a tomb of faded memories. As she reached the half-open door, she heard the twins' choking cries. He entered without fear, finding Liam and Matthew writhing in the luxurious cribs. He didn't rush to catch them, he just stood there in silence, observing every detail. And there, before the scene, Mary realized that something much bigger was hidden.
Mary stood before the cribs, not rushing, just watching. Liam and Matthew, they cried in sync, always facing the same direction. The children's red eyes were not looking for the door, nor the ceiling, but for the wall. It was the wall that divided the room from the old room. Anna Claire, the mother. Mary frowned, realizing there was a pattern the other nannies had missed. She approached the twins and whispered softly, "You're looking for someone, aren't you?" The crying grew even louder, as if confirming the suspicion. The silence between one sob and another seemed to carry the name of the absent mother. Edward, impatient, entered the door behind her, his face full of anger. "So what? Are you going to tell me you discovered what no doctor could?" Mary didn't back down, remaining calm in the face of the millionaire's outburst. "They don't cry from physical pain. It's not an illness, it's absence." Edward laughed bitterly, the sound mixing with the baby's cries. "Absence! They're 8-month-old babies. They don't know anything about life." "Yes, they do," she replied firmly. "They miss their mother, even if they don't understand her." And every word was like a mirror Edward refused to look into. "Shut up!" he roared, his eyes brimming with pent-up hatred. "Those boys killed Anna Claire. If it weren't for them, she would be here." Mary took a deep breath, absorbing the weight of that cruel and unfair accusation. The housekeeper, Mrs. Collins, who was listening from the door, put her hand to her mouth, shocked. Never in months had he heard Edward confess that bitterness out loud. The air in the room felt heavier, as if pain permeated the walls. Mary, however, did not back down from the emotional abyss that was opening up. "They didn't kill her, Mr. Lancaster. They're the last gift she left." The answer cut through Edward like a sharp blade, cutting through his resistance. But instead of giving in, he burst into nervous laughter, a desperate defense. "You don't know anything about me or my family, you insultant little maid." Mary kept her gaze steady, even under the weight of that hostility. "I don't need to hear from you, sir. I just need to hear their cries." The babies continued, eyes fixed on the wall, as if calling someone from there. "They're showing where it hurts. It's not in the body, it's in the heart." Collins, overcome with emotion, whispered, "My God, they look into Mom's room." A deathly silence took over the room, broken only by the twins' sobs. Edward paled, unable to face the wall that separated his life from grief. It was the room of Anna Claire, locked for 8 months since the day of the tragedy. All the souvenirs had been taken from the house, as if they had never existed. But the children, even without understanding, cried out for the void he had created. Mary approached him, her voice firm and compassionate at the same time. "Until you face this door, they will continue to cry." And in that moment, Edward realized he could no longer run from the past.
Edward collapsed into an armchair, as if the entire weight of the world had fallen upon him. His hands were shaking, his face was sweaty, his eyes fixed on the floor like a defendant before a judge. Mary remained standing silently, knowing that this was the moment for confession. Collins approached slowly, holding a set of weathered keys. "Sir, perhaps it is time to open Mrs. Anna Claire's room." Edward looked up, furious and terrified at the same time. "No! That room is dead, just like she is dead!" And the very force of the sentence made him shudder like a broken man. The governess, with tears held back, dared to reveal the secret she had been keeping silent. "Before she died, your wife gave me these keys, and a request." Edward took a deep breath, unable to accept what he was hearing, but also without the strength to deny it. "She left letters, sir, letters for the boys, one for each year of their lives." The silence in the room grew denser, the twins crying softly as if listening. Mary came closer and added in a firm voice, "They need to hear from their mother somehow." Edward closed his eyes, hot tears streaming down his hardened face. He knew he could no longer delay the open wound that was consuming him. With trembling hands, he took the key and walked down the hall to the locked door. The heart beat like a war drum, announcing the inevitable confrontation. When the lock turned, the creak echoed like a scream from the past. The room was intact, frozen in time, as if Anna Claire would return at any moment. The sweet scent still lingered in the air, mixed with the dust of months of neglect. On the dresser, photographs of the couple smiling on trips, parties, and at their wedding. And on the nightstand, a photo of Anna Claire, pregnant, radiant, caressing her belly. Edward fell to his knees before the image, overcome with collapse. Collins took from a secret drawer a wooden box, which he had kept with devotion. Inside, dozens of numbered envelopes, Anna Claire's delicate handwriting in the details. The first one read, "To Liam and Matthew, on their first year of life." Edward opened the envelope with sweaty hands and ragged breathing. The letter said, "My loves, if you are reading this, it is because Mommy couldn't stay." Mary held back her tears, while the babies seemed to calm down with the reading. "You are the greatest gift I could give to the world. Never blame yourselves for my departure. And finally, take care of Daddy. He will really need your love." Edward couldn't go on. The tears flowed uncontrollably, sobs racking his chest. Mary, firmly, approached and placed her hand on his shoulder like a silent angel. "She didn't blame them, Mr. Lancaster. It's you who blames yourself." Collins wept silently, confirming what he had always known but never dared to say. "I forced her. I didn't want to get pregnant, but I insisted." Pain oozed from every word, as if guilt was burning him alive. Mary looked him in the eye and said, "Anna Claire chose to love, not to blame. You need to accept it." And in that moment, the millionaire realized that his true prison was his own conscience.
The twins' cries echoed loudly again, as if they were asking for something impossible to ignore. Edward, still kneeling before his wife's photo, covered his face with his hands. "I can't do it. I don't know how to be a father. I only know how to lose," he murmured in despair. Mary, firm, approached without fear the emotional abyss that swallowed him. "It's not about knowing, it's about trying. And they don't need perfection, just presence." Edward lifted his head, his eyes watering, searching for excuses that didn't exist. "I haven't touched them even once. What if I'm not capable?" Mary replied with cutting sweetness. "Then learn now, before it's too late." She walked over to the crib and picked up Liam in her arms, rocking him lovingly. The baby cried loudly, but gradually calmed in the humble woman's lap. Mary walked over to Edward, held out the boy, and said solemnly, "He doesn't want my arms, Mr. Lancaster. He wants yours." The businessman recoiled, as if he had seen a flame about to burn him. "I can't. When I look at them, I see Anna Claire dying on the operating table. And they see a father who never touched them," Mary replied without losing her firmness. "Choose, keep running, or finally hold on to the life she left." With trembling hands, Edward approached his son as if facing an enemy. He picked Liam up, stiff and awkward, almost like someone holding a ticking time bomb. But the moment the baby felt his father's warmth, something changed in the air. The crying suddenly stopped, replaced by a deep, magical silence. Collins put her hand to her mouth, overcome with emotion, unable to hold back the tears. Mary smiled discreetly, as if she knew the truth would eventually come out. Edward looked at Liam and saw not the memory of death, but the reflection of life. And for the first time in 8 months, he truly felt like a father. Matthew, in the other crib, watched the scene with tear-filled eyes.
He also extended his little arms, begging for the same gesture of love. Mary encouraged. Now it's his turn. They've always cried together. They want to stop together. Edward hesitated, but the invisible current of fatherhood was already pulling him closer. With her heart racing, she took Matthew in her other arm, hugging both her children. The silence became absolute, as if even the walls breathed a sigh of relief. Liam rested his little head on his father's chest. Matthew sighed contentedly in his arms. And the man who had been on the run for months discovered that a hug could heal wounds greater than time. Tears streamed down Edward's face, but this time they weren't tears of guilt, but of release. "They stopped! My God, they stopped crying!" he said in disbelief. Mary put her hand on his shoulder and added, "They never needed silence, only love." The businessman who had previously shouted orders and numbers now mumbled words of tenderness. The twins who had previously cried all night now fell asleep in their father's arms. Colin stood there crying, watching the miracle he had waited for so long happen before his eyes. Edward, looking at his children, whispered in a choked voice, "Anna Claire, I promise." And the promise was not just to his wife, but to the boys and to himself.
In the following days, the mansion of Bel-Air began to change the atmosphere. The echo of constant crying gave way to childish giggles and small babbles. Edward, once a hostage to contracts and endless meetings, now woke up early, not for work, but for preparing bottles and humming lullabies. Mary, always attentive, guided him patiently, like a silent teacher. Mrs. Collins looked on proudly, saying that the house was finally breathing again. Liam and Matthew, for the first time, slept peacefully throughout the night, and the mansion, which was once a tomb of memories, became a home. Edward learned to hold his children's small hands without fear of breaking them. She learned to change diapers, give baths, and even laugh at the inevitable messes. Business meetings no longer had the same weight in his life as before. He discovered that contracts could be reworked, but time with children could not be. Mary became more than an employee. She was the godmother and guardian of that family. Each night, she told stories of courage and love so that the boys would grow up strong. And with every simple gesture, she showed Edward that to love was to learn every day. The pain was still there, but now it was mixed with hope. On the first anniversary, the house was filled with flowers and excited guests. It was the first party since Anna Claire's death, a new beginning that everyone had been waiting for. Liam was the first to risk his unsteady steps, drawing applause from those present. Matthew then repeated the feat, falling to the carpet laughing. Edward ran to hug them, proud, his heart bursting with joy. And it was in this embrace that a new surprise happened, even more exciting. Both boys looked at him at the same time and said, "Daddy." The word pierced the air like a ray of light, dispelling all shadows. Edward fell to his knees, holding his children and crying like never before. But now they were sweet tears, washing away years of guilt and silence. He looked up at the Los Angeles sky, lit by the reddish sunset, and he whispered, "Anna Claire, our children are happy. I kept my promise." Mary, overcome with emotion, discreetly wiped away the tears that were running down her face. She knew this was not just a father's victory, but a family's healing. Collins, in the background, murmured, "She's watching from up there, smiling," and the whole house seemed to confirm those words with an indescribable peace. From that night onward, the mansion of the Lancasters was never the same again. The once dark corridors echoed with laughter and children's footsteps. Edward, once a slave to guilt, now lived as a present and loving father. Mary, the humble woman who had arrived asking for a job, had become irreplaceable, not just as a helper, but as an essential part of the rebuilt family. Liam and Matthew would grow up surrounded by love, not tears. And Los Angeles would hold the story of a man who found his heart again, thanks to the courage of a simple woman who dared to listen to the cry of truth.